Hi guys, so Boris Johnson was at a manufacturing plant where he gave an update on the talks that are taking place between the EU and the UK. And of course, again, he sold the idea, or attempted to sell the idea, of a no-deal Brexit being just as good as a Brexit deal. So let's hear what he had to say.
Well, we're always hopeful, and as you know, the negotiations are continuing. We've got our teams still out there in Brussels, and if there's a big offer, a big change in what they're saying, then I must say that I've yet to see it.
Okay, so what he's doing here is he's offloading responsibility onto the EU. He's painting the picture that, he's willing to compromise, but the EU have not compromised. And I think this is more evidence to support the idea that he wants to leave without a deal. He wants to say, look, we did everything we could. The EU wouldn't compromise. I wasn't willing to compromise the sovereignty of the UK, our freedom to fish wherever we wanted in our waters, all of this type of language, because he wants to sell the idea of a no-deal Brexit. But of course, he won't call it a no-deal Brexit. He call it an Australian-style deal or WTO terms, which is just misleading. And once again, Boris Johnson's attempt to lie and to confuse the public.
Fortunately, at the moment, as you know, there are two key things where we just can't seem to make progress, and that's this kind of ratchet clause they've got in to keep the UK locked in to whatever they want to do in terms of legislation, which obviously doesn't work. And
okay, so this ratchet clause, what he's talking about is this idea that, let's say for example, the UK and the EU have a trade deal. They work out a trade deal, and this one aspect of the trade deal is the requirement of having equal standards, for example, on the environment, on workers' rights, on products. Now, I talked about this before. Let's say, for example, the EU say, we're going to, later on, they decide after their agreement with the UK, we want to eliminate, for example, single-use plastic. Now, I'm just taking this as an example. It's not something that the EU have decided or anything like that. But let's say, for example, the EU say, we want to eliminate single-use plastic in all products in the EU. Anyone who has access to the single market would be expected to follow suit. Now, if the UK decided, well, actually, we don't want to follow that rule after having the trade deal, well, what would be the solution? What could the EU do in that situation? Well, they would say, well, if you still want to access the single market, if you want to sell your products that are no longer compatible with this new standard, then you don't have access to the single market anymore. Or you would, for example, face sanctions like tariffs or whatever. This is the ratchet clause or the evolution clause that the European Union regard as. So this, I understand from a point of view that this seems unfair. It's like changing the rules. But you have to remember that the European Union and the UK are two different entities. One is much larger than the other. And one of them say, look, for us, there's a benefit in having access to your market, the UK. But for the UK, it's much more important having access to the European market. They're not equals. I know Brexiteers try to paint it as equals. They're not equals. And if the UK were to access the single market and not respect the rules, this would undermine the single market. And the EU will not allow the single market to be undermined. That's what I've been trying to explain to Brexiteers since the beginning. The EU will protect itself first. It doesn't care about money. It doesn't care about trade to the extent that people think it does. First and foremost is protecting the EU itself. And if it allows certain aspects to be undermined, then it will eventually collapse. It won't collapse because it's some sort of dictatorship or empire or whatever the Brexiteers try to tell people. It will collapse because it will have undermined itself. Now, in a separate issue, there are serious concerns about how Poland and Hungary are acting. And this could be undermining the European Union in a different way. But when it comes to trade and the UK's position, the EU will defend itself, and it will not allow a third country to dictate terms or to undermine it. That's what I want people to understand.
Then there's the whole issue of fish, where we've got to be able to take back control of our waters. So there's a way to go. We're hopeful that progress can be made, but I've got to tell you that from where I stand now, here in Blythe, it's looking very, very likely that we'll have to go for a solution that I think would be wonderful for the UK. We'd be able to do exactly what we want from January the 1st.
So, what he's trying to do is he's trying to paint a beautiful picture of a no-deal Brexit. We'll be able to do what we want. It'll be a wonderful situation. It will not be a wonderful situation. You will not be able to do whatever you want, because going into WTO terms, there are certain requirements that you have to follow. And then there will be trade disputes.
Obviously, it would be different from what we'd set out to achieve, but
it will be different to what we set out to achieve. Boris Johnson sold the idea of an oven-ready Brexit deal, which turned out to be a lie, and it was the withdrawal agreement. Then he was telling people at the beginning of last year, or the beginning of this year as well, that to leave without a deal would be a failure in statecraft. No, I think it was at the end of last year he said this. So he's been selling the idea of having a deal. We're going to get a deal. Now, of course, he's not going to say we're leaving without a deal. He's going to say we're leaving with an Australian-style deal.
I have no doubt that this country can get ready and, as I say, come out on World Trade terms.
So the problem with World Trade Organization terms is that it covers very little in regards to services. And of course, the UK trade mainly in services. UK manufacturing has been gutted over the last number of decades by the Conservative Party. Margaret Thatcher wanted to move out of manufacturing into financial services. And the WTO cover very little when it comes to services. You actually have to work out some sort of agreement. So it's looking more and more likely that Boris Johnson will leave the transition period without a deal. He'll try and sell it as an Australian style deal. And unfortunately, I think many people in the UK will be confused. It's understandable. And they will think that Boris Johnson has achieved something because, well, he told people he achieved something. He told people that leaving on Australian terms or WTO terms is just as good as having a deal. I wish people would ask him, well, if it's just as good, why are you wasting time negotiating? Of course it's not as good. That's why they were negotiating. But at the end of the day, I think Boris Johnson knows he's going to end up kicked out, or he will leave number 10 at some stage. I think quite early next year. It depends on, many different factors, but Boris Johnson will not be prime minister in the next election, or he won't be around for the next election. So he knows he's going, and he wants to appear to have achieved something, and that will be his Australian style deal. Because of course there will be somebody else who will have to pick up the pieces. It will be another Conservative leader, or it may be Keir Starmer sometime down the road. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?